The fall air in Madison, Wisconsin, had a bite to it in late October of 1983. Maple leaves crackled underfoot, and the skies hovered in shades of soft gray. That afternoon, 15-year-old Lori McTavish coasted down the sidewalk on her skateboard, hands in the pockets of her faded denim jacket, headphones over her ears. She was headed to the Eastfield Skatepark, a fading landmark in a city on the cusp of change. The skatepark had been a magnet for teens since the late 70s, built on a patch of old industrial ground. Concrete bowls, graffiti-covered ramps, and a rusted maintenance shed gave an edgy, unofficial air. But the city had made its decision. By the end of the month, the park would be shut down permanently and bulldozed. Word spread fast, and that week it had become a pilgrimage site for the regulars, a chance to say goodbye. Lori wasn't just any skater. She was known for her fearless downhill runs and the star-shaped gold necklace she wore every day, a handmade piece from her grandmother. The necklace shimmered under the collar of her jacket, and those who knew her remembered how she'd often reach up and grip it when she was thinking. That Thursday, Lori arrived at the park a little after 3:30 p.m. Several teens were already there, gathered around the halfpipe, trading music tapes and skating the worn curves one last time. She greeted a few friends, dropped her board, and skated for nearly an hour, until the sun began dipping behind the industrial buildings that bordered the west side of the lot. Around 5 p.m., Lori was last seen near the old maintenance shed, an aging wooden structure with peeling green paint and a chain-locked door. A couple of skaters mentioned she was talking to a boy no one recognized, someone in a black hoodie leaning against the shed wall, but no one paid much attention. It wasn't uncommon for out-of-towners or older teens to drift through on the last days of the spot like Eastfield. By evening, the temperature had dropped. The lights around the park flickered and buzzed. Most of the teens headed out before 6, but Lori never made it home. Her parents assumed she had gone to a friend's house, but by morning, when she hadn't shown up, panic set in. Calls were made. Police were contacted. The search began. Officers arrived at Eastfield and found Lori's skateboard leaned upright against a dumpster near the back fence. Her headphones were looped around the grip tape. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, no clothing left behind. It was as if she had simply stopped skating and walked off into thin air. 3 days later, her denim jacket was found 3 blocks away in an alley behind a shuttered hardware store. Inside one pocket was a pack of gum and a crumpled receipt from a local diner dated the same day she vanished. Rumors bloomed quickly. Some said she'd run away. Others whispered about the boy in the hoodie. A few swore she was still in town, hiding from something. But as weeks passed and no new leads emerged, the story faded from headlines into late-night conversations. By 1985, the city followed through on its promise. Eastfield Skatepark was demolished. The concrete bowls were jackhammered and the maintenance shed, forgotten by most, was flattened and buried beneath layers of dirt and gravel. Nothing was ever built on the site. The land sat vacant for decades, fenced off and overgrown with weeds. Lori's disappearance remained one of Madison's coldest cases. Her parents eventually moved away. Her name lived on in yellowed police files and fading flyers stored in metal drawers. The gold star necklace, her most cherished possession, was never found. 40 years passed. In the spring of 2023, construction began on a long-abandoned lot. A new community center was planned, complete with a fitness area, classrooms, and even a small indoor skate ramp as a nod to the site's history. Crews dug up old foundations, poured new cement, and framed the building with fresh wood. Then, in mid-October, just weeks before the grand opening, something unexpected surfaced. During routine electrical work, a contractor named Kevin Arlo was running wiring behind a newly installed drywall panel when he noticed a gap. It was narrow, but wide enough to reach into. His fingers touched something small and metallic lying on bare concrete. He pulled it out, a delicate gold chain tangled and slightly tarnished. Hanging from it was a small star-shaped pendant. He showed it to his supervisor, who paused. Didn't a girl go missing here? Back in the day? Kevin shrugged. Maybe. This was an old park, right? They handed it off to the site manager, who contacted local authorities just to be safe. Detective Natalie Ruiz, a 30-year veteran of the Madison Police Department, was called to the scene. She had heard of the McTavish case. It had haunted the department for years. When she held the necklace in her gloved hands, something clicked. She requested access to archive case files, and within hours, her suspicion was confirmed. A photograph taken in 1983 showed Lori standing on her skateboard, grinning at the camera. Around her neck, clearly visible, was the same gold star pendant. The necklace was identified as a handmade, one-of-a-kind piece gifted to Lori by her maternal grandmother. Its craftsmanship matched the original description in the missing persons report exactly. Ruiz returned to the construction site. The section of wall where the necklace had been discovered was in what had once been the southeast corner of the old maintenance shed. And then, workers uncover more. Behind the drywall, within a sealed cavity that had once been part of the original structure, they found aged-wood paneling and an older, hidden door frame. The space, roughly the size of a walk-in closet, was filled with dust and cobwebs. Etched into one of the boards, faint and worn by time, was a message written in blue ink. LM was here. Nobody listened. The ink was faded, the letters slightly smeared, but the initials were unmistakable. Lori McTavish had been in that room. Detective Natalie Ruiz stood motionless inside the narrow cavity behind the wall, flashlight beam trembling slightly as it passed over the writing again. LM was here. Nobody listened. The ink had faded, but the letters were sharp enough to suggest they had been written in frustration, possibly fear. The chamber was no more than 6 feet deep, and maybe 4 across, barely enough room to sit up. The original wood paneling, likely part of the maintenance shed's inner structure, had been sealed away under decades of construction material. Whoever had written that message had done so long before the drywall and insulation had been added. Ruiz called in forensics immediately. The room was treated like a sealed time capsule. No one was allowed to disturb the contents further until everything was documented. Technicians arrived within hours, armed with cameras, UV scanners, and sampling tools. One of the first things they found, tucked in a corner beneath layers of dust, was the brittle remains of a spiral-bound notebook. The cover was torn, its pages damp and fused together, but a few scribbled phrases could still be seen under forensic lighting. Why won't anyone hear me? It's been 2 days. I think. Cold. No light. Ruiz leaned in close as the team carefully lifted the notebook from its resting place. The words looked like they'd been written with a school pen, simple, rounded handwriting. She flipped back through the McTavish case file later that evening, sitting alone in the evidence room, the scent of dust and aging paper filling the air. In Lori's school assignments, math worksheets, a short essay about her favorite song, the same rounded lettering appeared. Lori had written those messages. There was no doubt now. The question that haunted Ruiz wasn't just how she ended up inside that space, but why no one had found it during the original investigation. In 1983, search teams had swept the skate park, including the exterior of the maintenance shed, but the building had been locked and declared structurally unsafe. No one had thought to check inside its walls. And by the time demolition crews arrived in 1985, the shed had been partially buried under rubble before being sealed beneath new soil. The cavity Lori had been trapped in was never a room in the traditional sense. It was a false wall, likely created during a patchwork repair when the building had been repurposed from a factory outbuilding decades earlier. She must have entered through a loose board or hidden panel, possibly on a dare or simply out of curiosity. Once inside, something shifted and the way out disappeared. Back at the site, the forensic team discovered deep scratches on the inner panels, some horizontal, some vertical, where someone had tried to pry at the wood. A small rusted nail was found embedded in one board, bent backward, likely pulled loose in desperation. Then, another chilling detail emerged. Near the base of the cavity, buried in old insulation material, was a small plastic barrette with a chipped pink star. Lori's childhood best friend, Kelly Travers, now in her late 50s, was contacted and asked to identify it. She took one look and nodded with tears in her eyes. She wore that all the time. It was mine, actually. I gave it to her in 7th grade. She kept it clipped to the strap of her backpack. Kelly had been one of the last people to see Lori that day. She hadn't been at the skate park, but remembered Lori saying she might explore the shed before it got torn down. I told her not to, Kelly said. It was dark and creepy in there, but she loved weird places. The investigation now turned toward reconstructing the layout of the old shed. Building permits from the 1940s revealed it had been altered multiple times, with temporary fixes, makeshift repairs, and strange angles in its architecture. Architects and historians were brought in to analyze the blueprints. They confirmed that a person could have slipped into the false wall space without anyone ever realizing it existed, especially if a pile of old equipment or boards had collapsed behind them. A map of the original site was created and overlaid with the new construction. It showed that the drywall panel where the necklace had been found was almost perfectly aligned with the southeast corner of the old maintenance shed, the very last place Lori was seen. Detective Ruiz brought Marissa Bell, Lori's cousin and closest living relative, to the site. Marissa, now a mother of 3, had never stopped wondering what happened that day. "When I saw the necklace on the news," she said, holding back tears, "I knew. I just knew. My grandma only made 2 of those. One's in my jewelry box. The other was Lori's." Ruiz showed her the hidden chamber. Marissa stood at the threshold, peering into the dark space. "She must have been terrified," she whispered, "but she left her name. She wanted someone to know she was there." The phrase, etched in ink, "Nobody listened," echoed louder now. It wasn't an accusation. It was a plea. A decision was made to leave the chamber intact within the new community center. The room would be sealed behind glass, preserved not as a morbid artifact, but as a quiet memorial. A plaque would be added with Lori's name, age, and a quote from a recovered notebook. "It's been 2 days. I think." Local media covered the discovery with reverence. Old photos of Lori circulated again. Her wind-blown hair, the skateboard, the necklace catching light. As news spread, former skaters who had spent their youth at Eastfield reached out. Some remembered the boy in the black hoodie. Others recalled hearing knocking sounds from inside the shed once, but brushed it off as wind or animals. Detective Ruiz followed every lead, but 40 years had blurred timelines and faded memories. Still, one final detail kept her awake at night. Inside the cavity, just beneath the message Lori had written, another set of markings was discovered. These in pencil, not ink. Fainter, slanted, different handwriting. She wasn't alone. The words were barely visible. Just 4 of them, written in faint pencil along the lower edge of the wooden panel. She wasn't alone. The handwriting was tighter, more angular than Lori's, and positioned lower, as if written by someone crouching or lying down. Detective Natalie Ruiz stared at the panel for a long moment before speaking. "We need to know if Lori left that message or if someone else was in there with her." The forensic team carefully documented the new phrase. Experts compared the lettering to Lori's schoolwork once again. The conclusion was quick and unsettling. The pencil message was not written by the same hand that had written "LM was here." Nobody listened. This suggested a chilling possibility. Another person had entered or been trapped in the same space. But who? No second set of remains had been discovered, and nothing else in the narrow cavity indicated companion. The space was incredibly confined, barely enough for one teenager to sit upright, let alone 2. And yet the message was there, as plain and deliberate as if someone had wanted it found. Ruiz turned her attention to cold case archives. She combed through missing persons files from Madison and surrounding counties, focusing on late 1983 through 1984. Most were accounted for: runaways who returned home, teens found out of state, or cases ultimately explained. But one file stood out. In December of 1983, 2 months after Lori vanished, a 14-year-old girl named Dana Halpern was reported missing from a group home just across town. She had no family nearby, no media attention, and her case was never connected to Lori's. Dana's file was sparse. She had left behind a journal, 1 page of which mentioned Eastfield Skatepark. "Might go check out the old park before it's gone," she wrote. No one followed that thread. Her disappearance was assumed to be a runaway situation. Now, Ruiz wasn't so sure. She requested a handwriting sample. Only one known example existed: a form Dana had filled out in school months before she vanished. When compared with the pencil message found inside the wall, a forensic analyst returned a tentative match. The writing style, the shape of the S, the angle of the A, they aligned. Ruiz sat back in her chair. What if Dana went looking for Lori? What if she found something and ended up trapped herself? The implications were staggering. If true, Dana had entered the structure weeks or even months after Lori. The message she wasn't alone could have been a final note, not a warning, but a truth. Inside the cavity, further scanning revealed a tiny rusted button tucked between floorboards. It didn't match anything Lori had been documented wearing. Dana's intake photo showed her in a gray corduroy jacket with matching buttons. But no DNA could be extracted. The environment had simply degraded the evidence too far. Still, the weight of probability pressed in. Word of the second message reached Marissa Bell, Lori's cousin. She returned to the site, where construction on the community center had paused to allow further investigation. Standing behind the glass panel that now protected the cavity, Marissa whispered, "It means she wasn't completely alone. Maybe that brought her some peace." Ruiz agreed. Whether Dana had arrived by accident or in search of Lori, the fact that both girls may have shared those final moments changed the story. Meanwhile, the city of Madison watched the case unfold with stunned attention. Lori McTavish had never been forgotten, but now Dana Halpern's name began to emerge from the shadows. Newspapers ran her photo next to Lori's. The two girls, strangers in life, perhaps, now linked by the smallest thread of handwriting in a hidden space no one was ever meant to find. Ruiz met with former staff members from the group home where Dana had lived. One woman, now retired, recalled Dana as a quiet, observant girl who often kept to herself. She looked up to other girls. She talked about Lori once or twice, said she thought she was brave, independent. Another connection. Back at the site, a thermal scanner passed over the remaining sections of wall around the cavity. One scan showed a cold void behind a vertical beam. A camera was inserted through a drilled access point. Inside was a tiny compartment, no bigger than a shoebox. Within it sat a dusty plastic pencil case, once pink, now gray with age. It was sealed tight. Inside the case were 3 items: a folded piece of paper with faint pencil drawings, a silver safety pin, and a cheap plastic ring with a broken band. The drawing was the most compelling. It showed 2 stick figures, both with long hair, sitting side by side. One had a star on her chest. The other had what looked like a patch on her shoulder. Above their heads were small speech bubbles. The first said, "I think they forgot us." The second replied, "We won't forget each other." Ruiz studied the drawing for a long time. The paper was torn at the corner, and the lines were clumsy but expressive. This wasn't just a companion. This was friendship, formed in the darkest place, under the most hopeless conditions. But how had Dana gotten in? Experts speculated that after the initial panic of Lori's disappearance died down, the site had been neglected. If Dana visited in December and found a loose board, it's possible she entered the same hidden space Lori had. And if something collapsed, or if cold weather froze the warp would shut, she too might have become trapped. 2 girls. 2 lives lost in silence, buried beneath a shed no one thought to search. The news reached the last of Dana's living relatives, a second cousin in Minnesota. She came to Madison to see the site and quietly requested that Dana's name be added to the memorial beside Lori's. The community agreed. A new plaque was designed with both names, side by side. Beneath it, a quote from the drawing, "We won't forget each other." And yet, Ruiz wasn't ready to close the file. Because in one corner of the pencil drawing, half erased and barely visible, was a strange symbol, a star, and beside it, the shape of an open door. The team believed it was a child's way of expressing hope. But Ruiz had a different theory. What if there had been another exit, one that was never found? And what if someone else had used it? Detective Natalie Ruiz couldn't stop staring at the image. A simple child's drawing, 2 girls, speech bubbles, a star, and in the far corner, what looked like an open door. Most would dismiss it as a symbol of hope, but Ruiz had worked too many cases to ignore her instincts. What if it wasn't symbolic at all? What if there had been another way out? One that neither Lori nor Dana had found, or maybe only one of them had. She brought in a structural engineer named Ben Hargrave, a specialist in mid-century construction who had helped identify hidden spaces in cold case investigations before. They returned to the cavity inside the community center, now sealed behind glass, and used new scanning tools on the surrounding walls and floors. Beneath the rear panel, the scanner picked up a strange variation, an irregular void behind what was now part of the concrete foundation. Hargrave frowned and knelt to take measurements. "There's something behind here," he said. "Looks like it was sealed off during the demolition in '85. Concrete was poured right over this wall, but this used to be part of the foundation of the shed." He pointed to a portion of the original blueprints. "There's a utility crawl space that would have run beneath this wall, maybe 2 feet high, but passable if someone really tried." Ruiz's heart picked up speed. "So there was a way out?" "Maybe, but once the concrete was poured, it would have been completely sealed. You'd never know it existed without these scans." She had the area marked for excavation. With city approval, a small section of the newly laid foundation was broken open. Behind it, just as Hargrave predicted, was a narrow tunnel, about 2 feet high, running along what used to be the building's southern edge. It smelled of dust and mildew, but it was dry. Flashlights revealed broken boards, a rusted pipe, and old electrical conduit. Then, just 15 feet in, they found something that stopped them cold. A set of scrawled initials written in soot or charcoal along the wall, DH. And just below it, etched with something sharp, "Out, not gone." Ruiz stepped back. Dana had been here. She had made it this far. But what did "out"? Not gone mean? Was it a declaration of survival? Or something darker? An acknowledgement that escape hadn't meant rescue? The tunnel came to an abrupt end beneath what was now the community center's rear lot. Above it, paved over and turned into a parking area, lay a patch of asphalt that had cracked over time. Beneath that crack, the tunnel curved upward slightly, toward an old drainage opening. City maintenance records showed that this outlet had been bricked up in the late '80s, but it had once emptied into a shallow ravine behind the lot. If someone had crawled that far, it was possible, barely, that they might have emerged behind the site. Ruiz sent a team to examine the ravine. The area had since been reforested with city trees, but traces of the old drain system remained. And near a patch of moss-covered rocks, a metal object was recovered from the soil, a small tin compact mirror engraved with a heart. Inside was a single slip of folded notebook paper. On it were 4 words, "I waited." She didn't. The paper was water-damaged and brittle, but the words remained. Ruiz sat in silence as she read them. Dana had escaped. Lori hadn't. And Dana had waited. But for how long? And where had she gone afterward? Back in the station, Ruiz reopened Dana Halpern's file. She went over every detail, every note. Dana had been living in the group home only 6 months before she vanished. She had no siblings, no living parents. Only one distant cousin had been located, and even she remembered Dana only vaguely. But something else stood out. 3 months after Dana's official disappearance, a young woman had been caught shoplifting from a grocery store in a neighboring county. She gave a false name, had no identification, and refused to speak. The officer on duty noted that she was quiet, malnourished, and possibly in shock. She was released the next day and never seen again. There was no photo, just a physical description. Approximately 5'2", thin, shoulder-length dark hair. About 14 to 15 years old. Ruiz sent the details to a forensic sketch artist and matched the information to Dana's known features. The result was a striking resemblance. Dana Halpern may have escaped, but she hadn't gone far, and she hadn't trusted anyone enough to come forward. In the weeks that followed, Ruiz and her team tried tracking down any sightings, records, or aliases that could be tied to Dana, but no paper trail emerged. It was as if she'd vanished a second time, this time by choice. Marlene Bell, Lori's cousin, was informed of the new developments. The idea that another girl had been there with Lori, and that she might have survived, was bittersweet. She tried. Marlene said, "Dana," she waited, "but I don't blame her for leaving. She was just a child, too." Ruiz didn't close the file. Instead, she added a new section titled Survival Hypothesis Unconfirmed. and she left a message of her own in the hidden chamber, a laminated card, placed carefully on the inner wall beneath the glass enclosure. It read, "To whoever wrote, she wasn't alone, you weren't, and neither was she. We hear you now." Later that year, the community center was completed and opened to the public. The preserved cavity became a quiet memorial room called the Listening Space. Visitors could read Lori and Dana's messages, see the drawings, and learn about what had happened. No sensationalism, no dramatization, just silence, names, and the echoes of voices that had once cried out in the dark. Ruiz still visits sometimes. She doesn't speak during those visits. She simply sits and listens. And then one day, an envelope arrived. No return address. No fingerprints. Postmarked from Duluth, Minnesota. Inside was a single strip of paper, carefully folded. In the center, written in delicate cursive, was a message. "Tell her I kept a star." The handwriting was smooth and unfamiliar. Older, more mature, but the message was unmistakable. "Tell her I kept a star." Detective Natalie Ruiz held the slip of paper in gloved hands, studying every curve of the letters. The envelope bore no fingerprints, no DNA, and had been mailed from a small post office in Duluth, Minnesota. There was nothing else inside. No name, no date, just that quiet line. It wasn't confirmation, not legally, but to Ruiz and to those who had followed the case for decades, it was more than enough. Dana Halpern was alive, or at least she had been, recently enough to write and send that message. And if it truly came from her, then it confirmed what the evidence had already whispered. She had escaped that hidden chamber beneath the old skate park, crawled through darkness, waited for help that never came, and then stepped back into the world as someone new. But she hadn't forgotten. Word spread quickly through the department and into the community. Reporters came calling again, but Ruiz refused to comment beyond a single statement. Some mysteries don't end with arrests or answers. Some end with voices finally being heard. The envelope was placed in a glass case at the community center, beside Lori's recovered necklace and Dana's compact mirror. The listening space, once a silent tribute, became a place of quiet reflection, where survivors, families, and anyone who had ever felt overlooked could find a piece of themselves. For Marissa Bell, the message brought an unexpected peace. "She kept the star," she repeated softly during an interview. "That means Lori gave it to her. Or maybe Dana took it with her after Lori was gone. Either way, it mattered. That necklace was everything to Lori. She never took it off." To Marissa, the message wasn't just a sign of survival. It was a promise kept, a memory carried. Still, Ruiz couldn't let go entirely. She continued quiet outreach to shelters and clinics across the Midwest, asking discreetly about women in their 50s who had arrived with no background or who used aliases. Nothing surfaced. And maybe that was how Dana wanted it. Maybe she had lived her life on the margins, working under the radar, keeping her story private. Maybe the message was her way of closing the loop without re-entering the world that had once failed her. Or maybe she was preparing to return. A year passed. Fall returned to Madison. The leaves changed colors. Children rode scooters past the new community center, laughing as they passed the small memorial garden beside it. Inside, visitors came in steady numbers, some curious, others quiet. A guest book near the entrance began to fill with notes. One page simply read, "For Dana, I would have listened." Another said, "I was a scared girl once too. Thank you for not giving up." And then, one morning in early November, a staff member at the center found something else. Tucked between the pages of the guest book was a Polaroid photo. It showed two girls, young teens, sitting on the edge of a concrete bowl, skateboards at their feet. One had a long braid. The other wore a pink beret. The image was old, yellowed at the corners, but unmistakable. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words. She smiled like she meant it. Ruiz stood in the gallery that afternoon, holding the photo. She knew the city wouldn't verify its source. No fingerprints, no timestamp, no proof. But she didn't need any. The photo was real, and someone had carried it for a long, long time. Later that week, another anonymous envelope arrived, this time from a town even farther north. Inside, a folded map of Madison marked an X over the original site of the skate park. No note, no handwriting, just the X. Ruiz smiled. "She's watching," she murmured. At the annual memorial that December, families gathered to light candles along the pathway of the listening space. A plaque now included both Lori and Dana's names, along with the words that had linked them across decades. "We won't forget each other." In the closing moments of the ceremony, Marissa Bell stepped forward and addressed the quiet crowd. My cousin didn't vanish into nothing. She left behind a trail, one that took 40 years to read. But more than that, she left behind someone else. Someone who saw her, someone who tried. And I think that's what matters most. She paused and added, "If Dana ever hears this, thank you for not letting Lori be forgotten." A hush settled over the group as candles flickered in the evening breeze. And somewhere, maybe close, maybe very far away, someone carrying an old memory and a star-shaped necklace might have felt it. Because stories like Lori and Dana's don't just disappear. They settle into the ground, into walls, into hearts. And when they are finally unearthed, they echo, softly, fiercely, forever.